Resolution 1540, 2004, Non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, adopted by the Security Council at its 4956th meeting. On the 28th of April 2004, the Security Council, affirming that proliferation of nuclear, chemical and biological weapons, as well as their means of delivery, constitutes a threat to international peace and security. Reaffirming, in this context, the statement of its president adopted at the Council's meeting at the level of heads of state and government on the 31st of January 1992, S/23500, including the need for all member states to fulfill their obligations in relation to arms control and disarmament and to prevent proliferation in all its aspects of all weapons of mass destruction. Recalling also that the statement underlined the need for all member states to resolve peacefully in accordance with the Charter any problems in that context threatening or disrupting the maintenance of regional and global stability. Affirming its resolve to take appropriate and effective actions against any threat to international peace and security caused by the proliferation of nuclear, chemical and biological weapons and their means of delivery. In conformity with its primary responsibilities, as provided for in the United Nations Charter. Affirming its support for the multilateral treaties whose aim is to eliminate or prevent the proliferation of nuclear, chemical or biological weapons and the importance for all states parties to these treaties to implement them fully in order to promote international stability. Welcoming efforts in this context by multilateral arrangements which contribute to non-proliferation. Affirming that prevention of proliferation of nuclear, chemical and biological weapons should not hamper international cooperation in materials, equipment and technology for peaceful purposes, while goals of peaceful utilization should not be used as a cover for proliferation. Gravely concerned by the threat of terrorism and the risk that non-state actors such as those identified in the United Nations list established and maintained by the committee established under Security Council Resolution 1267 and those to whom Resolution 1373 applies, may acquire, develop, traffic in or use nuclear, chemical and biological weapons and their means of delivery. Gravely concerned by the threat of illicit trafficking in nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons and their means of delivery, and related materials, which adds a new dimension to the issue of proliferation of such weapons and also poses a threat to international peace and security. Recognizing the need to enhance coordination of efforts on national, sub-regional, regional and international levels in order to strengthen a global response to this serious challenge and threat to international security. Recognizing that most states have undertaken binding legal obligations under treaties to which they are parties, or have made other commitments aimed at preventing the proliferation of nuclear, chemical or biological weapons, and have taken effective measures to account for, secure and physically protect sensitive materials, such as those required by the Convention on the Physical Protection of Nuclear Materials and those recommended by the AIA Code of Conduct on the Safety and Security of Radioactive Sources. Recognizing further the urgent need for all states to take additional effective measures to prevent the proliferation of nuclear, chemical or biological weapons and their means of delivery. Encouraging all member states to implement fully the disarmament treaties and agreements to which they are party. Reaffirming the need to combat by all means, in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations, threats to international peace and security caused by terrorist acts. Determined to facilitate henceforth an effective response to global threats in the area of non-proliferation. Acting under Chapter 7 of the Charter of the United Nations. 1. Decides that all states shall refrain from providing any form of support to non-state actors that attempt to develop, acquire, manufacture, possess, transport, transfer or use nuclear, chemical or biological weapons and their means of delivery. 2. Decides also that all states, in accordance with their national procedures, shall adopt and enforce appropriate effective laws which prohibit any non-state actor to manufacture, acquire, possess, develop, transport, transfer or use nuclear, chemical or biological weapons and their means of delivery, in particular for terrorist purposes, as well as attempts to engage in any of the foregoing activities. Participate in them as an accomplice, assist or finance them. 3. Decides also that all states shall take and enforce effective measures to establish domestic controls to prevent the proliferation of nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons and their means of delivery, including by establishing appropriate controls over related materials, and to this end shall a. Develop and maintain appropriate effective measures to account for and secure such items in production, use, storage or transport. b. Develop and maintain appropriate effective physical protection measures. c. Develop and maintain appropriate effective border controls and law enforcement efforts to detect, deter, prevent and combat, including through international cooperation when necessary, the illicit trafficking and brokering in such items in accordance with their national legal authorities and legislation and consistent with international law. d. Establish, develop, review and maintain appropriate effective national export and transshipment controls over such items, including appropriate laws and regulations to control export, transit, transshipment and re-export, and controls on providing funds and services related to such export and transshipment, such as financing and transporting that would contribute to proliferation, as well as establishing end-user controls and establishing and enforcing appropriate criminal or civil penalties for violations of such export control laws and regulations. 4. Decides to establish, in accordance with Rule 28 of its Provisional Rules of Procedure, for a period of no longer than 2 years, a Committee of the Security Council, consisting of all members of the Council, which will, calling as appropriate on other expertise, report to the Security Council for its examination, on the implementation of this resolution, and to this end calls upon states to present a first report no later than 6 months from the adoption of this resolution to the Committee on steps they have taken or intend to take to implement this resolution. 5. Decides that none of the obligations set forth in this resolution shall be interpreted so as to conflict with or alter the rights and obligations of state parties to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the Chemical Weapons Convention and the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention, or alter the responsibilities of the International Atomic Energy Agency or the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. 6. Recognizes the utility in implementing this resolution of effective national control lists and calls upon all member states, when necessary, to pursue at the earliest opportunity the development of such lists. 7. Recognizes that some states may require assistance in implementing the provisions of this resolution within their territories and invites states in a position to do so to offer assistance as appropriate in response to specific requests to the states lacking the legal and regulatory infrastructure, implementation experience and/or resources for fulfilling the above provisions. 8. Calls upon all states a. to promote the universal adoption and full implementation, and, where necessary, strengthening of multilateral treaties to which they are parties, whose aim is to prevent the proliferation of nuclear, biological or chemical weapons. b. To adopt national rules and regulations, where it has not yet been done, to ensure compliance with their commitments under the key multilateral non-proliferation treaties. c. To renew and fulfill their commitment to multilateral cooperation, in particular within the framework of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons and the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention, as important means of pursuing and achieving their common objectives in the area of non-proliferation and of promoting international cooperation for peaceful purposes. d. to develop appropriate ways to work with and inform industry and the public regarding their obligations under such laws. 9. Calls upon all states to promote dialogue and cooperation on non-proliferation so as to address the threat posed by proliferation of nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons, and their means of delivery. 10. Further to counter that threat, calls upon all states, in accordance with their national legal authorities and legislation and consistent with international law, to take cooperative action to prevent illicit trafficking in nuclear, chemical or biological weapons, their means of delivery, and related materials. 11. Expresses its intention to monitor closely the implementation of this resolution and, at the appropriate level, to take further decisions which may be required to this end. 12. Decides to remain seized of the matter,